Welcome back to the American Toolworks Restoration. Today we're looking at the carriage and the saddle. If you remember from our last episode, we talked about the fact that the carriage was stuck along the ways and didn't want to rotate very well. So today we're going to see what's going on. First thing to know is we've got this lathe has a lead screw and a feed screw, both of which look to be in fairly decent condition. I think that's like a 2-inch lead screw. The saddle is held to the apron by 8 bolts, and you can see that I have many of them out, with just the outer tube remaining on the front side, but there are 4 bolts on each side. You have 2 longer ones in the front and the shorter ones in the back. I'd like to talk about how I'm getting these screws out. They're a straight blade screw, and I had to make a parallel blade tool to remove them. So you can see here is the tool I made, 7/8 inch wide, about 125 at the end there, and turn that on the lathe and put it in the mill and just cut those down until they fit. I've got a 13/16 wrench flat on the end of it, a hole through the middle just in case I need more leverage, but the important part is to press down into that screw while turning it. Even a little tap on the end if it's a little tough, but so my initial plan was to pick just pick the saddle up and set it off to the other side. So here you're going to see that I'm going to separate it. I've got it supported by a couple jack stands underneath so the apron doesn't land on the lead screw and the feed screw to hold it up. Right here I'm trying to figure out why these won't separate. Now you can see right here that the apron is actually locked into a groove on the saddle. So we need to separate that and make an air gap there so that the apron will pull away and the saddle can lift up. You can see I've kind of pried those apart and made a little bit of room. I got a screwdriver at the other end, and I was able to just pry this apart with another screwdriver and just kind of wedged it in there and just made enough space. So I think the saddle will now pass the apron. You can see right there, it's not a lot of space to separate these two. We haven't already talked about it. The cross slide's actually in really great shape, and that whole assembly was moving really well before I took it off. There's not a lot of damage and not a lot of wear on this lathe, at least down in these parts. One thing I gotta watch out for is I'm not sure how to get that threading dial off, so I'm gonna need to be careful until I can get that apart. You'll find out later that my surprise was it just wasn't attached. It just had a couple pins in it, didn't have any screws in it. So here I'm just set up so you can see what happens here as I try to lift the saddle off now that we've got those separated. I apologize if the video quality is a little grainy here. I'm really trying to lift from the front of the lathe here towards us, and there you can see with that little bit of distance the saddle is separated from the apron. And we finally got the saddle and the apron separated. We lost a little bit of content moving the saddle, but you'll see here in a second that we did indeed move the saddle to the end of the lathe here. And now we're going to look inside the apron to see what's in there. At first glance, the gears look pretty good. No chipped or broken teeth. Things seem to be moving freely. So I'm a little concerned about what's going on in there, since there's nothing really obvious. You see those star gears are moving freely, but they won't unthread, which is something that I suspect at this point they should do. I believe at least one of these has a clutch in there that changes the direction or changes the feed. So we're just going to pull the clamps off, and we're going to start seeing what it takes to separate it. I decided that the apron's got to come off the lathe, so here you kind of see the sequence of events that we go through to pull the tailstock and the saddle off. Now let's move on to the tailstock. Now unfortunately I opened this door and that really decreased the quality of the video here, so unfortunately I'll just tell you what I'm doing. Removing the 4 screws that hold the tailstock to the plates underneath the ways to clamp it down. But you can't see that, so here we're just gonna watch me muddle through this. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but this tailstock is actually almost as heavy as the apron. You'll see me grab this with the cherry picker, and great video work again by the amateur videographer. Just putting the board down to put this on so it doesn't go right on the concrete floor. But again, this thing is heavy and does not want to move. Here you can see that we're looking at the pillow block, catch block here at the end of the lathe. It has 2 bolts on the top that were obvious, and then I discovered 2 screws down in the middle. Again, those were those flat slotted screws that were sunk in. I tried my tool that I used on the apron, but it was too big. So what you'll see here in a clip coming up is me taking a tapered screwdriver and using a wrench to try to pull those out. Now I'm trying to figure out how this is held on there, and so just light taps here with the hammer. These are in no way hard taps. I'm just seeing what separates, what moves, what where the cracks between the pieces start showing. Oh look, I just discovered those screws. Surprise, surprise. There we go. And they both broke loose with not a lot of pressure on the wrench. That one was a little tighter, I think, because it was the last one, holding all of this together. So now back to the tapping. Oh, there we go. Popped right off. Now my expectation is this pillow block would just slide off the end, and I was disappointed to find out that that's not what happens. So in some footage that we don't have available to us, my brother had come over and we ended up having to use a pulley puller to separate these. I was trying to move the apron, thinking maybe the apron was just putting too much pressure on them and pinch them together, but it had nothing to do with it. So you can see here, I was looking to take some pressure off the apron so I can separate that pillow block at the end. Again, working on the theory that the apron was just hanging and putting too much pressure and pinching those 2 screws together. But what do I know? This is the first time I've ever taken a lathe like this apart. I just pretend to be a machinist in my after hours. Have absolutely no formal training on any of this. So, well, here we are with the apron entirely removed. I wish I could have recorded that. I had it on time lapse on one of my other cameras that failed, but let's see. I don't know why this is kind of fuzzy around the edges, but that's alright. This wheel is still pretty hard to move, so it's definitely whatever's happening in this is in this apron. So we'll get to taking this apart here in the next couple weeks and see what's going on. So in the next episode, we're going to take apart the apron and look at all the parts inside and see if we can figure out why this isn't working. So stay tuned for part 3 of the lathe restoration. Again, we're not trying to make this a showpiece or a museum piece, just trying to bring it back into operation. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.